hard to follow the river in a straight line when it zigzags all over the place. One of the other instruments that it's not the most important for you to know right now because it comes with flying a complex aircraft, and that'll be your manifold pressure. But you need to know about it because it's in the acronym A Tomato Flames. Now, if you haven't heard of A Tomato Flames yet, it's an acronym to basically remember all the things that you need that are required when you want to fly. So A Tomato Flames, you have airspeed indicator, your tachometer, which is your RPMs, your oil pressure gauge, your manifold pressure, your altimeter, your temp gauge, oil temp gauge, fuel gauge, landing gear indicator. That's another one that you don't have retractable landing gear, so you don't have that in some of these planes. That'll come on a complex aircraft, but it's in this list, so you need a landing gear indicator. Anti-collision lights, which are the little blinking lights, the beacon. You can see the beacon right here. A magnetic compass, an ELT, or emergency locator transmitter, and safety belts. Those are the main things that you need to fly a plane that are required by the FAA. Now, obviously, if you're not flying a complex aircraft, you're not going to have landing gear indicator and manifold pressure, and that's okay. But to fly, this kind of plane, you don't need those, but you need everything else. Now, if you're going to be flying at night, you want to add flaps, and not these flaps. Oh. Speaking of flaps, I must have hit the button and it went down. I didn't even realize it. So that's why that's why we were having so much problem getting any lift. I even hit the button thinking, okay, why are we not getting any altitude? Thinking, well, are my flaps down for some reason? Wow, the simplest little things. So when you're not paying attention and something happens and you're trying to figure out what's happening, it's a little difficult because it's hard to look around the cabin. I should have looked down and seen the flaps, because for some reason it was up like that. Wow. I didn't say I was the best teacher. I'm trying to go through all this because talking it through helps me to remember a lot of this stuff, because now I'm going back through the book again for like the 4th time, trying to remember everything. Hey, look, the flaps are down again. For some reason. That's odd. So it's down now. But for some reason when I came back out, I don't know why they reset. Oh. I know why. I have a flap lever. I have a flap lever on my yoke, on the Turtle Beach Velocity 1, and I must have knocked it, and it was about a quarter of the way up, so for some reason it anytime I reset the flaps to be close or full up, it kept resetting them so that they were coming down again. So I'm hoping that people share some of their stories of what it was like when they were getting ready for their check ride, or maybe when they did their first solo. Were you nervous? I was super nervous when I did my first solo, which was just 3 takeoffs and landings to a full stop. My instructor was there, my mom was there, my dad was there, my wife was there, everybody was cheering me on. And they got to watch me take off, go around in the pattern, and then land. I actually did 3 really good landings. I don't know if they were butter, but they were really good in my opinion. They were nice and smooth. And it was a lot different because that was the first time, like, all of a sudden my instructor's not there, so there's another 190, 200 pounds outside of the aircraft. So it was a different feel of the aircraft. We're going to start making our turn here to 051. I know I said we were going to be at 7,500, but I clicked the altitude hold right where it was. Just leave it right there. So we have our mixture is looking good. I just barely have it leaned out. I've got our RPMs at about 2,200. I can even bring that back just a little bit, down to 2,100. And we now have what looks to be the 14 knot headwind once again. I should put a timer on these videos because I know my last one was really long, and I thought I would take a lot longer getting through Chapter 3. Chapter 4 is the principles of flight, and it's fairly short as well. So let's start going through Chapter 4, because we can probably get through this one in this video as well. So Chapter 4, Principles of Flight. So this is going to kind of talk about what makes the airplane fly, and not just the aircraft itself and lift and weight and all that kind of stuff. So it starts off, air is a fluid. When most people hear the word fluid, they usually think of a liquid. However, gases, like air, are also fluids. Fluids take on the shape of their containers. They do not resist deformation. Even when the smallest stress is applied. Or if they do, they only resist it slightly. So when you talk about fluids, you talk about things like viscosity. Like in a car, you talk about oil, high viscosity oil, low viscosity oil. Viscosity is the property of a fluid that causes it to resist flowing. So high viscosity fluids are thick and resist flow. Low viscosity fluids are thin and flow easily. So if you think about water would probably be low viscosity, where grease is high viscosity or very viscous. So because air is a fluid, they also talked about the viscosity of air. So it resists flow around any object to some extent. When we have friction, that's another factor. When a fluid flows over or around an object, it's called friction. Friction is the resistance that one surface or object encounters when moving over another. And it exists between any two materials that contact each other. Every now and then I've got to look up and just look at the Grand Canyon. I've never actually flown the Grand Canyon in the simulator, so this is a lot of fun, just being able to set it up and talk about aviation. So pressure is the force applied in a perpendicular direction to the surface of an object. So pressure is usually measured in pounds of force exerted per square inch, so PSI. And an object completely immersed in a fluid will feel pressure uniformly around the entire surface of the object. If the pressure on one surface of the object becomes less than the pressure exerted on the other surfaces, the object will then move in a direction of the lower pressure. So that's important, right? Because we were talking about there's low pressure on top of the wing, high pressure on the bottom. And so since there's lower pressure on the top, the high pressure wants to sweep around the wing. It wants to get to that low pressure. It wants to equalize it. High pressure is always chasing low pressure. Same with weather. You have a low pressure system. There's a lot of times a high pressure system right behind it, and it's chasing that low pressure system. It's trying to overtake it. It wants to equalize that pressure. When it does that, you get a lot of high winds and storms and things like that. So we deal with a lot of different pressures in aviation, not just the pressures that are needed to achieve lift or even thrust. Let me check my fuel. Okay, I think it's time to change our fuel tanks again. So let's go in and over there on the right hand side. There's more fuel on the right there. We'll pop back out because this is prettier. So of the different pressures, the first one is atmospheric pressure. It's one of the basic factors in weather changes. It helps to lift an aircraft, and it actuates some of the the important flight instruments like the altimeter, airspeed indicator, vertical speed indicator, and the manifold pressure gauge. So the pressure of the atmosphere varies with time and location, but due to changing atmospheric pressure, a standard reference was developed. So when we talk about standard atmosphere at sea level, we're talking about with a surface temperature of 59 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 degrees centigrade. I always forget the Fahrenheit. The centigrade, 15 degrees is standard, and 299 or 2 inches of mercury. So with that, you want to remember, so every 1,000 feet you climb, the temperature drops by 2 degrees, up to 36,000 feet. At that point, it's just about negative 55 degrees Celsius. It's really cold. And you switch over to standard pressure on your device. In these planes, we obviously aren't going to go that high, so they don't have that. But when we talk about atmospheres, let's look over here. So here's where you would find the 299 or 2. It's on the barometric side, also called the baro. So you would adjust this and see how the altitude changes. So the higher the pressure, it's saying we're higher in altitude. And we go down in pressure, and it says we're lower. I didn't get the ATIS, so I'm going to cheat and hit the B key, and it's going to automatically set it to about 299 or 0. So we need to know. That's why when you get your ATIS and they're like at the airport, they say that the pressure is 298.0. So you can set your baro to that, so you can know exactly how high you are when you're coming into land. You also know the elevation of the airport, but so that your instruments aren't reading the incorrect things. It also helps, like right now I'm flying over some mesas here. If I looked at my map and my map says, okay, you're coming up on a mesa at 6,393 feet. Okay. But I have my barometer set incorrectly. What if I was in IFR conditions? I could fly into the mountain if it was set incorrectly. If I thought that I was at 7,000 feet and I was going to clear this mesa by 700 feet, and I have it set, set too high, I'm going to hit that mountain. That's why a lot of times too, when you're flying through different areas and you get handed off to another controller and you make contact with them, they'll tell you what the current pressure is in that area. And then you're constantly adjusting it. One time I was with my instructor and we left the high desert and we were flying over mountains to get into San Bernardino. And where I was in Victorville, it was a particular barometer setting at the airport, and then after we switched over to the other controller, he gave us a different barometer reading, which dropped my altitude by about 300 feet. And it was enough that I was like, oh, I have to pull up. You know, I have to gain some more altitude quickly, because I'm heading straight for these mountains, and I had enough altitude before. So the standard atmospheric, our standard atmosphere is also called ISA, for International Standard Atmosphere. So a lot of times they'll be like, they'll ask you, what is standard atmosphere? 15 degrees, 29 or 9 or 2. Okay, and if you're at 1,000 feet, then just know that's going to change with your temperature. So it'll be now 13 degrees at 1,000 feet. So here, if it's 29 or 9 or 2, 15 degrees, 1,000 feet, you're at 13 degrees, 2,000 feet, 11 degrees. So you can kind of estimate as you go up what the temperature is going to be up there. Like right now, in our little scenario, it's saying it's about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. It's kind of bouncing around there, but it's about maybe 10 degrees outside centigrade. Now this will also come in handy when you're trying to figure out your pressure altitudes and your density altitudes, which is actually next in our book. So pressure altitude is the height above a standard datum plane, which is a theoretical level where the weight of the atmosphere is 29 or 9 or 2 as measured by a barometer. So that's what we're setting our barometer in our plane for. So the pressure altitude can be determined by one of the following methods. Number one, setting the barometric scale of the altimeter to 29 or 9 or 2 and reading the indicated altitude, or applying a correction factor to the indicated altitude according to the reported altimeter setting. Pull out one of my other notes. So to find out what your pressure altitude is, here is the calculation. 29.92 minus your current altimeter setting, and then multiply that by 1,000, then add your field elevation. So I had created one where my altimeter setting was 3009. So I minus that by 29 or 9 or 2, and I get 0.17. Negative 0.17. Now you multiply that by 1,000, you get negative 170 and the airport I was at was 802 feet. So I add 802 to negative 170, and I get 632. So the pressure outside was acting more like the pressure at 802 feet above mean sea level was acting more like pressure at 632 feet. Ooh, wow, that's pretty. We're getting into the deeper part of the canyon here. All right, so I hope you understand that about the pressure altitude. Pressure altitude is important because it's necessary to know what it's going to be when you're trying to take off or fly through a particular area. If it's going to be, you know, cold outside, or humid, or hot, all these things, they play different factors with the pressure, and that comes into use with the performance of the aircraft. Sometimes you have to make a go no go decision based on, is this going to be good for us to fly in this particular kind of pressure? Density altitude is the vertical distance above sea level in the standard atmosphere at which a given density is to be found. So the power, basically it affects the performance of the aircraft because air becomes less dense. So the power, because the engine takes off in less air. Thrust, because a propeller is less efficient in thin air. And lift, because the thin air exerts less force on the airfoils. Make a turn here to heading 114. So, density altitude is pressure altitude corrected for non-standard temperature. That's the key phrase right there. Let's say that again. Density altitude is pressure altitude corrected for non-standard temperature. So as the density of the air increases, aircraft performance increases. But if the air density decreases, then the aircraft performance decreases. So think of it in the sense of you're at sea level and the air is warm, not too hot. You know, it's a nice day, clear skies, all that kind of stuff. And you basically have perfect flying conditions. But then you fly to an airport that's at 7,000 feet. It's cold, maybe a bit more humid. But the air up there it's different. It's your aircraft's going to perform worse, because think of it like at sea level you have a cube of air, like say a balloon of air, and then you go up to 7,000 feet, you have that same amount of air, but now it's in a much larger area. The balloon expands. If you've ever driven up into the mountains with a water bottle in your car and you had the cap on, by the time you get up to your to the cabin, that bottle will have expanded. Same thing goes if you start up there, you take a sip of water, close it off, and you don't take another drink until you get back down to sea level, the bottle's kind of crushed in. So it's a lot more dense down low than it is up high. One thing to think of is density altitude is how your airplane feels. What is it performing like? I feel like we're a little low here. So let's increase our altitude. I don't want our airspeed to drop too much. Not sure what's going on with this airplane today, that the autopilot keeps going off and it keeps turning all over the place. It's got a mind of its own today. Keeps throwing our altitude off. Just take it up to 8,000 feet and level off. Right, so there is there's another formula to get your density altitude. So first you got to do the pressure altitude, which was the formula excuse me, which was the formula 29902 minus the current altimeter setting multiplied by 1,000 plus the field elevation. That gives you your pressure altitude. Now, density altitude, you have to take the ISA, which was the International Standard Atmosphere, and subtract that from the outside air temperature. Then you multiply that by 120. And then you add that to your pressure altitude. So before I said I had an altimeter setting of 3009. So subtracting that from 29902 gave me negative 0.17. Then I multiplied that by 1,000, got negative 170. Negative 170 plus the field elevation of 802, which was the airport I got that altimeter setting at, was 632. So my pressure altitude was 632. So now I had an outside air temperature of 33 degrees. and I took the ISA, and you figure out how many thousands of feet are you up. So I was saying 802 feet, so that's basically, let's say, 1,000 feet. So it was 15 minus 2 degrees. So you get 13 degrees. So you have 33, which was the outside temperature, minus 13 degrees. And you get an ISA deviation of 20. So then that 20 times 120 was 2,400. Now you take the 2,400, add that to your pressure altitude of 632, and you get 3032. My density altitude is 3,032. So see how that's different? So that's way different. It's like I have a pressure altitude that's telling me that it feels like it's 632 feet outside, but the plane feels like it's 3,032. And that's because of the temperature. It's cold outside. So the plane is not going to perform as if it's at 632 feet. It's going to perform like it's at 3,032. It's a big difference. Some of these mountains look like they're a little bit higher. Yeah. Some of them are about 7,600 feet. That we're going towards 7,700 feet. And we are currently at 8,000 feet. We're just going to barely squeak by them. Now I don't have the pressure altitude or the density altitude figure out for where I'm at right here, but I kind of get a feeling like the plane is performing like it's a lot higher. Like I said earlier when we looked here, let's see what our temperature is. Oops. Our temperature is maybe 12 degrees Celsius. So it's pretty cold outside. So the airplane is definitely acting like it's maybe another 1,000 feet up. So it's acting like it's like 9,000 or even 10,000 feet right now. Just barely going to make it over this mountain. But here we are in the beautiful Grand Canyon. This is looking like this is the main part of the Grand Canyon that you see when you go there. It's pretty amazing. All the colors, just crazy hills and valleys. So, cold is not the only factor. increasing the temperature. It's not the only factor that makes the aircraft perform poorly. One thing in ground school I learned was the 3 H's: high, hot, humid. If you're in that situation, it can be just as bad on the engine. The aircraft is not going to perform well. It doesn't like that either. You're going to have longer rolls on your runway, longer landings, so you need to take that into consideration when you're looking at the airport you're landing at. Oh, it's only 2,000 feet. You're probably going to take the entire runway to come to a stop. You might even take the entire runway to take off. So one thing you could do is always add 1 notch of flaps when you take off. Maybe even 2 or 3. You can do a soft field takeoff or a short field takeoff where you add full flaps and you rotate a lot sooner. Instead of at 65, you might start picking up off the ground at 50 knots. And then you match the VX, which is the best angle of climb speed. So you have the VX, which is the angle of climb speed, and VY, which is the best speed for actually climbing overall. That's really neat looking. So we move on to humidity. It's also called relative humidity. Refers to the amount of water vapor contained in the atmosphere, and it is expressed as a percentage of the maximum amount of water vapor that the air can hold. Warm air holds more water vapor, while cold air holds less. So if you're ever watching a storm approach and the humidity starts to rise, the closer it is to 100% humidity, it's going to start raining. If it's at 100% humidity, it probably already is raining. Well, that's a weird looking mountain texture. So then, now we get into some more of the science. So all the pressure altitudes, the density altitudes, hot and cold, and the moisture, that's how an airplane feels and how it's going to perform, if it's going to perform well or not. Doesn't always mean that you can't go flying. It just means don't expect the aircraft to be acting like it's at 100%. I'm checking one thing real quick because it says that I'm coming up on an area that has a 9,000 foot height. I'm just trying to see if we're going to cross over that 9,000 foot mark or not. We're actually coming up on Phantom Ranch, which is the ranch that is down at the bottom of the canyon, which is really neat. So now we get into the science. Newton's basic laws of motion. Now you should probably memorize all three of these. Newton's first law. Every object persists in a state of rest or uniform motion in a straight line unless it is compelled to change that state by forces impressed upon it. So basically, that's saying, you know, an object at rest stays at rest unless it's acted upon by an outside force. So you could be standing there and nothing is going to move you, but then a gust of wind blows and it makes you kind of lean over because you're like, whoa, that wind was strong. Well, something pushed you. So you were the object at rest. The wind was the outside force and it pushed you. And your body reacted to it. So an object at rest stays at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. Newton's second law, force is equal to the change in momentum per change in time. For a constant mass, force equals mass times acceleration. That's a mouthful. So that means when a body is acted upon by a constant force, its resulting acceleration is inversely proportional to the mass of the body and is directly proportional to the applied force. So kind of think of that in the sense of you're flying along at 100 knots and then the wind kind of pushes you from the back and it's a 114 knot wind or less, but it ends up pushing you to 100. What I meant to say was that it pushes you to 114 knots. So you have 14 extra knots of speed that's accelerated you, and you've done nothing different. So your body is acted upon by a constant force, and its resulting acceleration is proportional to the mass of the body. The third law, which is probably the one that everybody always remembers, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. So the way they describe it is the propeller moves and pushes back the air. Consequently, the air pushes the propeller in the opposite direction. So this is going to come around when we talk about the gyroscopic forces and the P factor. So as the plane is the propeller is rotating one direction, the plane itself wants to rotate in another direction. If you've ever been in a car, like a big old muscle car from the 60s, and you have that V8 under the hood and you're revving the gas and you feel the car just like tilt from side to side really quick. That's because it's putting out so much torque that it's caused, as the engine is spinning one way, the torque is going the other way to equalize the pressure. So we're about to fly over Phantom Ranch. I'm just curious to see if they modeled anything down there. It's in that little valley right here. Yeah, that's the ranch. And then over here, I guess they didn't model the visitor center, but this is usually somewhere along here is where they have the visitor center for the Grand Canyon. Getting a little off course here. If you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, you know that it's really a sight to see. If you haven't been, I definitely suggest going. And the moment you walk out and see it, your jaw will drop. It's pretty amazing. All right. So the next part, which is incredibly important, that you need to remember this: Bernoulli's principle of differential pressure. He made a Venturi tube. It has an air inlet that narrows to a throat and an outlet section that increases in diameter towards the rear. The diameter of the outlet is the same as that of the inlet. So the mass of the air entering the tube must exactly equal the mass exiting the tube. At the constriction point, the throat, the speed must increase to allow the same amount of air to pass in the same amount of time as in all other parts of the tube. And when the air speeds up, the pressure also decreases. Past the constriction, the airflow slows and the pressure increases. So this is important because this is how air goes over a wing. That's why air that goes under the wing is traveling at a normal speed, but the air that goes over the wing has to travel much faster to join the air on the other side of the wing, on the back side of the wing. So as it goes over the wing and traveling faster, the pressure decreases, creating that low pressure. And then you got the high pressure underneath. And that's where you get lift, because that high pressure is then trying to equalize that low pressure and trying to get up by pushing up on the wing, creating lift. So within the wing, let's get a close up here. And we'll zoom in. Oh, perfect. So from this point here, if it stops moving, to this point here, a straight line is drawn, and that's called the chord line. This is the upper camber and the lower camber. So you'll see as the air is moving here, it's traveling across a fairly flat surface here, right? And then, oops, let's just get slightly higher. But you can see here, it's going up and over. So that's creating a much lower pressure on the top there. Okay, we're going to follow the river here. And I'll turn a little bit. You can kind of see the river there, so we're going to head due north here in a second. So an airfoil is constructed in such a way that it takes advantage of the air's response to certain physical laws. This develops two actions from the air mass: a positive pressure lifting action from the air mass below the wing, and a negative pressure lifting action from lowered pressure above the wing. So that's what I was just explaining there with the wing, with the air flowing underneath and over it. An airfoil is shaped to cause an action on the air and forces air downwards, which provides an equal reaction from the air, forcing the airfoil upward. And let's turn ourselves due north at this point. So basically, with using Bernoulli's principle of pressure, we have low pressure above, high pressure below. With pressure distribution, you got the average of the pressure variation for any given area of attack is referred to as the center of pressure. The average of the pressure variation for any given area of attack is referred to as the center of pressure. So aerodynamic forces acts through this center of pressure, and at high angles of attack, the CP moves forward, while low angles of attack, the CP moves aft. In the design of wing structures, this CP travel is very important since it affects the position of the air loads imposed on the wing structure in both low and high area of attack conditions. An airplane's aerodynamic balance and controllability are governed by changes in the CP. So with a low angle of attack, your center of pressure is basically right in the middle of the wing, right? Maybe a little bit aft. A normal angle of attack, it is a little bit more forward, but you have positive pressure pushing up on the wing, and then that's increasing your lift. With a low angle of attack, you'll have some of that pressure pushing down on the front tip of the wing, causing lowered lift on the front, but maybe a little bit of higher lift on the back end. Now with the higher angle of attack, you've got a lot more pressure pushing up on the front of the wing, causing more pressure on the front of the wing to increase that lift. But you don't want to keep a high angle of attack for a long time, because whenever you have a high angle of attack, your airspeed drops. As you were seeing earlier when I was flying, when the flaps for some reason deployed on their own, and I was pulling back because I didn't see that the flaps had deployed, and my airspeed kept decreasing. I got down to 50 knots, which I couldn't understand what was going on. silly flaps. I don't know what's going on, if it's my controller or if there's something with the airplane. So to finish off this chapter, there's one more item. Air tip vortices. The high pressure area on the bottom of an airfoil pushes around the tip to the low pressure area on the top. This action creates a rotating flow called a tip vortex. The vortex flows behind the airfoil, creating a downwash that extends back to the trailing edge of the airfoil. This downwash results in an overall reduction in lift for the affected portion of the airfoil. So if you ever watch like big aircraft and they come through like a cloud or something, and you see those big circular things off the tips and it looks really cool, those are wingtip vortices. And can also be very dangerous. That's why when you're flying and you see that there's a jumbo jet on the runway, maybe he's taking off, you want to land before the point of when he takes off, because the vortices start the moment he leaves the ground. And the other thing would be when he's landing, once he touches down, the vortices go away. So if you're coming in behind a jumbo, you want to land after his point of touchdown on the runway. So you watch, where does he hit? Okay, he hits on the 1,000-foot markers. I'm going to land my little airplane after that. Because they those vortices will actually flip your plane. It will cause crazy disturbances. Now they do go out kind of like in a triangle. So if he's landed and he and you're still like a minute until you touch down, you'll probably be okay. But at the airport that I'm on, there's two parallel runways. I'll be coming in on one, and they've got bigger jets that come in on the larger runway, and they always warn you, hey, there's a Cessna Caravan or something coming in on parallel runway, be advised. And he's basically telling me that because those vortices can stretch out to like 1,000 feet. So if we touch down kind of at the exact same time, I could get hit by his vortices, even on another runway. That's also why when you are waiting to take off at a big airport, they have like a 3-minute separation, even between the big jets, because nobody wants to take off in somebody else's wake. It would be a very unpleasant takeoff. Let's see how we're doing in here. Let's take a look at our fuel. still doesn't look like we've used much fuel, does it? For some reason, it doesn't look like it's calculating it. Let's switch back over to the right tank. And everything looks good. See, we're only going 65 knots. We're going really slow, and our ground speed is 76. So we got a 10 knot headwind. So we can increase our throttle there. Maybe pick up a little time. It looks like we're coming to the end of the Grand Canyon here. The river is down there somewhere. Oh, there it is, off to the right. Take a look. So here we are. Let's see, we flew over Phantom Ranch here and we cut the corner. We're pretty close. So this leg was 38 nautical miles. This one is 25. So maybe that's 20 miles and 25. So we've got about maybe 45 miles to go. Let's take a look at this airport here. So 4,317. You see down here in the left corner, 4,317 is the elevation. So pattern altitude will be about 5,317. Their longest runway is 5,900 feet. And currently they're showing runway 15 with a headwind of 0 knots with a crosswind of 4 knots. So let's see. So 15. So we're going to have to come around and do a right base into runway 15. I'm not paying attention to really much of any of the other stuff because we'll learn this when you start doing instrument stuff. Even though this is an untowered airport, as you can see, it is red. Means untowered. These little knobs, that means there's gas. But at a smaller airport, you should always call ahead and find out, do you still have gas? Because sometimes they might be out for the day. This star up here, that means that there is a rotating beacon. And we'll go over beacons later. But there's different color codes. Green, white, and then green, white, white, and then green, yellow, I think, or yellow, white. That would be for helicopters. The green, white, white is military. 190 at 6 knots, 4 miles visibility, light snow, mist, scattered clouds at 7,000, overcast at 1,600. It's 1 degree with a 0 degree dew point, 29 or 82. So that is not accurate to what we're doing here today. So we'll go back. What we had originally thought about doing was runway 15. See, there's a 5 knot headwind, and it's only a 3 knot crosswind, so that is pretty good. I never did look at any of the approaches, but don't really need to. I'm just planning on coming in this way and then turning base and then final, because runway 15 goes to the south there. And we're almost to our next waypoint here, and we'll make a turn to 230. Sorry, 023. Okay, make our turn to 23. Looks like we've got a clear shot all the way. So yeah, there's Lake Powell in the distance, and our airport is going to be right over here, I think. Lake Powell, where the Grand Canyon begins. All right, so we're still on autopilot, just for the heading. Actually turn a couple degrees to the east, because we are a little off our course. Let's see if we see the airport. In there somewhere. Unless this is it. Off to the side there, I think that's what it is. This is the city of Page, I think. But it shows a little yellow area, so I think, or right next to the airport. So I think this is that little yellow area. Descending slowly at 500 feet per minute. Just about to hit 6,000. So we're doing pretty good, because we wanted 5,300 as the pattern altitude. I do believe that is our airport. Let's kick on our fuel and Landing lights. And I'm going to take it off of autopilot. Still descending. And 5,500. Airspeed's about 87-ish. Okay, we're at pattern altitude, so let's increase our throttle just to maintain our altitude. Ah, there's the airport. I was wrong about the other thing. So the airport's right there. So we're basically on base right now. Let's throw in a notch of flaps and get our airspeed lowered to 70. Pretty good. Let's turn final. Overshot it a little bit. Throw in another notch of flaps. Come on. Right at the end, it's gonna mess with me, isn't it? Let's go around. No, I wasn't going down. The airplane is, for some reason, wanting to nose down. I don't know what is happening here. I have the yoke completely tilted to the right, and it's turning to the left. So there is something funny going on with this airplane. See, I don't know why that happened out of nowhere. It just wants to keep rolling to the left. I did notice when I first bought this airplane that it did want to keep turning left, but it wasn't this much, and I did contact Just Flight and ask what's going on. They tried to say it was the sensitivity settings. Well, I've flown all kinds of other aircraft, and not a single one of them constantly wants to go that way. And they say, well, it's just, that's how the airplane acts. And it's like, no, I fly this airplane in real life, and if anything, it likes to kind of go to the right. At least the ones I do. But I mean, I've flown a bunch of cross countries, and I've sometimes you can have your hands off the yoke altogether, no feet on the pedals, and it's perfectly fine. See, it just wants to keep going to the left, and then all of a sudden it like registered I'm turning to the right. Okay. Let's try that again. Ooh, that's bright. Yeah. Just like a big dead zone gap going on here. Now I'm really high. So 2 notches of flaps. Might have to side slip it. That is not a side slip. It is not doing the right thing. Come on. Almost there. Yeah, last second, it's going to start flipping out. All right, well, we're down. We made it. Oh. Okay, let's see. Yeah, we'll exit here. And it's pretty much all general parking. And we'll put our flaps back up, and I'm not sure which place to go. Here, let's go to the left here and turn it to the next one. Not really sure where. Oh wait, here we go. I see a line on the ground. That's not going to be the most perfect, but we're parking here. There we go. And parking brake goes on. And let's turn our avionics off and cut our mixture. Wow, that was a long one. Night. I don't think it's nighttime. So that'll about wrap it up for us here, and hope you guys enjoyed that one. It was kind of fun watching or going through the Grand Canyon. And here we are. Welcome to Page Municipal Airport. Yeah, it's kind of a neat little approach. It comes in over Lake Powell. I just don't know why all of a sudden at the very end, like, it just starts tossing me up in the air, and the plane wants to stall. So maybe we'll try a different airplane next time. Maybe a Cessna or something. I just want to try to stick with the simplified aircraft, not with manifold pressure or anything like that. Just kind of the same kind of things that I'm training on. So we will be back for another episode very soon. That was chapters 3 and 4. And next time we'll cover chapters 5. And this will probably get broken up. All right. Well, thank you for flying with us here at Jellyverse Aviation. And we hope you had fun, because we had fun doing it. We'll see you next time.